The moment his arm dropped around her waist, I knew this reunion would be more than a trip down memory lane. I set my drink down, straightened my tie, and walked over, smiling like the world's most patient husband. In that instant, I wasn't the underdog anymore. I was the wolf they forgot was in the room. My name is Holden Solen, and I'm a project manager for residential developments. 41 years old, average height, thinning hair, and the kind of guy who blends into crowds at places like this. The Grandview Hotel ballroom was packed with my wife's former classmates, all trying to prove their lives turned out better than expected. The decorations screamed Class of 2004 in gold and burgundy, and the DJ was spinning the same songs these people danced to 20 years ago. Nora looked stunning tonight. She always did at these things. Her auburn hair was perfectly styled, her black dress hugged her curves in all the right places, and her smile could light up a room. She worked in public relations for a mid-sized firm downtown, and she knew how to work a crowd. I'd watched her glide through conversations all evening, catching up with old friends, laughing at stories I'd heard a dozen times before, but I hadn't expected Trent Ardell to show up. Trent was everything I wasn't in high school. 6'2", broad shoulders, the kind of jawline that belonged in cologne commercials. He'd been prom king to Nora's queen, captain of the football team, and the guy every other guy either wanted to be or wanted to punch. Now he owned Ardell Construction, one of the biggest development companies in the county. His success was written all over his expensive suit and the Rolex catching the light on his wrist. "We should have never broken up," he said, his voice carrying that same cocky confidence I remembered from 20 years ago. His hand rested on her hip like it belonged there, like the 2 decades between then and now had never happened. Nora laughed, not the polite laugh she gave to boring clients or awkward small talk. This was different, genuine, warm, the kind of laugh I used to get from her before our marriage became a series of scheduled conversations between her work trips and my project deadlines. That's when I started walking. The crowd seemed to part as I moved through it, conversations continuing around me like background noise. I could hear fragments, someone talking about their kid's college acceptance, another person complaining about mortgage rates, the usual reunion chatter, but my focus was locked on the 2 people standing by the dessert table, looking entirely too comfortable with each other. "Holden!" Nora's voice pitched higher when she saw me approaching. Her hand moved to Trent's arm, not pushing him away but not exactly welcoming my presence either. "Look who's here, Trent Ardell. You remember Trent from high school?" I remembered Trent. I also remembered his sister. "Of course," I said, extending my hand for a shake that lasted exactly the right amount of time to be polite but not friendly. "Good to see you, Trent. Still in construction?" "Business is booming," he replied, his grip firm enough to prove a point. "Just finished a major residential project over in Westfield, 60-unit development. Maybe you heard about it." I had heard about it. I'd also heard about the cost overruns, the delayed permits, and the corner cutting that led to foundation problems in half the units. But this wasn't the time or place for that conversation. "That's great," I said instead. "I'm sure the residents love the craftsmanship." Nora shot me a look that said, "Be nice," but I was already past caring about nice. I'd been nice for 15 years of marriage, nice when she worked late 3 nights a week, nice when she started taking weekend trips to conferences that never seemed to have any follow-up materials, nice when she suddenly became an expert on construction contracts, despite never showing interest in my work before. "Nora was just telling me about your father's development project," Trent continued, his arm still around her waist. "Sounds like a major undertaking. If you ever need a reliable contractor—" "Actually," I said, my voice steady and clear, "I think we're all set on contractors, but I appreciate the offer." The conversation continued for another few minutes, the kind of surface-level catching up that happens at these events. Trent talked about his business success, his recent divorce, his plans to expand into commercial properties. Nora hung on every word like she was hearing the most fascinating stories ever told. I stood there, nodding at appropriate moments, playing the role of the supportive husband. But inside, I was thinking about March. March was when Arielle Seldor, Trent's sister, first sent me a text message. It was simple, almost innocent. "Hey Holden, hope you're doing well. Saw Nora at the coffee shop downtown yesterday. She looked great." I'd thought it was odd at the time. Arielle and I had been friendly enough in high school, but we'd never been close. She was 2 years younger, quiet, smart, the kind of girl who got good grades and stayed out of the drama that seemed to follow her brother everywhere. After graduation, our paths had diverged completely. She'd gone to college out of state, gotten married, moved back after her divorce 5 years ago. The second text came a week later, then another. Always casual, always friendly, but with an undercurrent that I couldn't quite identify. She'd mention seeing Nora places, ask about my work, comment on how much she'd enjoyed talking to me at the grocery store or the bank, conversations I didn't remember having. It wasn't until the fourth text that things became clear. "I think we should talk," she'd written. "About Nora, about Trent, about things you should probably know." We'd met at a coffee shop across town, somewhere neither of us was likely to run into anyone we knew. Arielle looked different than I remembered, more confident, more direct. The shy teenager had grown into a woman who knew exactly what she wanted to say and how to say it. "They never stopped," she told me, sliding a manila envelope across the small table between us. "Even after she married you, even after he married me, they never stopped talking." The envelope contained printouts, screenshots of text messages, dating back years, email exchanges, photo timestamps from various hotels around the city, bank records showing deposits into an account I'd never seen before, phone records with numbers I didn't recognize. "How did you get all this?" I'd asked. "Trent's not as careful with his digital security as he thinks he is," she'd replied, "and he never bothered to change his passwords after our divorce. Some habits are hard to break." Now, standing in the hotel ballroom, watching my wife laugh at her ex-boyfriend's jokes while his hand rested possessively on her hip, all of that information came flooding back. The late-night text exchanges where they reminisced about the good old times. The hotel receipts from the last reunion, when I'd been home with the flu. The contract negotiations where Nora had suddenly become very interested in the details of my father's construction projects. "Well," Trent said, checking his watch, "I should probably mingle a bit more, but Nora, we should definitely catch up more later. Maybe grab a drink at the bar?" "That sounds wonderful," she replied, and I heard something in her voice that made my stomach tighten. Not the polite interest she showed to everyone else tonight, but genuine enthusiasm. "Actually," I said, my voice cutting through their moment, "I think Nora and I were about to head out soon, early day tomorrow." "Oh, come on, honey," Nora said, her hand finding my arm in what looked like an affectionate gesture but felt more like a warning. "It's only 10:30. The night is still young." Trent grinned, the same cocky smile I remembered from high school. "Listen to your wife, Holden. Live a little. Besides, I was hoping to introduce her to some of my business associates. Never know when those PR connections might come in handy." That's when I made my decision. Not the emotional, heat-of-the-moment choice that would have led to a scene everyone would talk about for years. This was calculated, precise, and delivered with the same calm tone I used in project meetings when I had to deliver bad news to clients. "You know what, Trent?" I said, my smile matching his for confidence, but carrying something else underneath. "You're absolutely right. You two should have never broken up." Both of them looked at me with surprise. Nora's grip on my arm tightened, and I could see confusion flickering across her face. "I completely agree," I continued, my voice carrying just enough to be heard by the small group of classmates who had gravitated toward our conversation. "You two were perfect together. In fact, I think it would have saved everyone a lot of trouble if you'd stayed together." "Holden," Nora said, her voice carrying a warning edge, "what are you—" "Because then," I said, my smile never wavering, I would have married your sister instead. Arielle's been texting me for months, and she's been very communicative about a lot of things. The silence that followed was the kind you feel in your chest. Trent's arm dropped from Nora's waist like he'd been stung. The color drained from my wife's face as the implications of my words sank in. The small crowd around us went quiet, sensing drama, but not yet understanding its scope. "What's that supposed to mean?" Trent asked, but his voice had lost its confident edge. "Oh, I think you know exactly what it means," I replied, pulling out my phone and scrolling to a particular text thread. Arielle's been very thorough in her updates. Screenshots, bank records, hotel receipts. She's quite the detective when she puts her mind to it. Nora's face had gone from pale to flushed, her eyes darting between me and Trent like she was trying to calculate how much I knew and how much damage control was possible. "I think," I said, reaching into my jacket pocket and pulling out the valet ticket for our car, "you can find your own way home tonight. Or maybe Trent can give you a ride. I'm sure he remembers the way to our house." I placed the ticket in her hand, my fingers brushing hers for just a moment. "I'll be staying somewhere else tonight. We can talk tomorrow when you're ready to have an honest conversation for the first time in years." The crowd around us had grown larger, drawn by the tension and the promise of scandal. I could see phones being pulled out, people positioning themselves to catch whatever happened next. This would be the story of the reunion, the gossip that would fuel conversations for months. But I was done being part of their entertainment. "Enjoy the rest of your evening," I said, nodding to both of them with the same polite smile I'd worn all night. "I'm sure you have a lot to catch up on." I turned and walked away, leaving them standing by the dessert table with a growing audience of former classmates who were just beginning to understand that they'd witnessed something significant. I could feel their eyes on my back, hear the whispered conversations starting, but I didn't look back. The hotel lobby was quieter, filled with the soft jazz music and muted lighting designed to create an atmosphere of elegant calm. I walked to the front desk, where a young woman with a professional smile greeted me. "I'd like a room for tonight," I said. "Something quiet if you have it." "Of course, sir. Will that be for one guest?" "Yes," I replied, handing her my credit card. "Just one." The hotel room was exactly what I needed. Clean, anonymous, and far enough from the ballroom that I couldn't hear the music or the conversations that were undoubtedly still happening about what they'd just witnessed. I sat on the edge of the bed, loosened my tie, and pulled out my phone. Arielle answered on the first ring. "I saw the texts," she said, without preamble. "Nora's been trying to reach you for the last 20 minutes. "I'm sure she has," I replied, kicking off my shoes and leaning back against the headboard. "How long have you known?" "Known for certain? About 6 months? Suspected? Years?" There was something in her voice that made me pay closer attention. Not just anger at her brother's behavior, but something deeper, something personal. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I needed to be sure," she said. "And because I needed to have enough evidence that they couldn't explain it away or make you think you were crazy. Trent's very good at making people doubt their own perceptions." I thought about that for a moment. In the 15 years I'd been married to Nora, there had been plenty of moments when I'd questioned my own instincts. Late nights when she claimed to be at the office but her car wasn't in the company parking lot. Weekend conferences that never seemed to generate any follow-up work or new contacts. Changes in her routine, her interests, her attitude toward me that happened so gradually, I'd convinced myself I was imagining things. "Tell me about the money," I said. "Your father's development project, the one in Riverside Gardens. Nora recommended Trent's company for the construction contract." "I know. She said she'd researched several contractors and his company had the best combination of price and quality." "Did you know she received a consulting fee for that recommendation?" I sat up straighter. "What kind of consulting fee?" $50,000, deposited into an account she opened 3 months before the contract was signed. I have the bank records." The number hit me like a physical blow. $50,000 was more than I made in a year after taxes. It was enough to pay off our credit cards, enough for a down payment on a bigger house, enough to matter in ways that would have changed our financial situation significantly. She never mentioned any consulting work, I said, because it wasn't consulting work. It was a kickback. Trent paid her to influence your father's decision, and she delivered. I thought about the conversations I'd had with my father about the project. He'd been considering several contractors, weighing bids and references and timelines. Then Nora had offered to help with the research, claiming her PR background gave her insights into company reputations and client satisfaction. She'd presented her findings in a neat folder, complete with charts and graphs that made Trent's company look like the obvious choice. My father had been grateful for her help. He'd even mentioned how lucky I was to have such a supportive wife, someone who took an active interest in family business despite having her own career to manage. "How did you get the bank records?" I asked. Trent used her account as a pass-through for some of his other under-the-table payments. When our divorce was finalized, my lawyer subpoenaed his financial records. Nora's account showed up because he'd been transferring money into it regularly. Regularly? This wasn't the first time, Holden. Your father's project was just the biggest one. The room felt smaller suddenly, like the walls were closing in. I got up and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot where cars were still arriving for late-night hotel bar visits and room service deliveries. "What else do you have?" I asked. "Text messages going back 3 years, email exchanges where they coordinate their stories about where they've been and when. Hotel receipts from the last reunion, when you were sick. Photos from a weekend trip they took to Chicago last spring while you thought she was at a conference." "Chicago," I repeated. I remembered that conference. Nora had been excited about it for weeks, talking about the networking opportunities and the workshops on crisis management. She'd come home with business cards and brochures, stories about presentations she'd attended and people she'd met. "They stayed at the Palmer House," Arielle continued, "registered under her name, but the room charges show 2 occupants. Room service for 2, spa treatments for 2, restaurant bills that would have been excessive for 1 person. I closed my eyes, trying to process the scope of what she was telling me. This wasn't a recent affair or a moment of weakness at a reunion. This was systematic, planned, ongoing deception that had been happening under my nose for years. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Why get involved?" There was a long pause before she answered. "Because Trent destroyed my marriage too," she said finally. "Not the same way, but just as effectively. He convinced my ex-husband that I was having an affair with a coworker, showed him carefully edited text messages, told him stories about seeing me places I wasn't supposed to be. He manufactured evidence and presented it so convincingly that David filed for divorce before I even knew what was happening. Why would he do that? Because I'd found out about his arrangement with Nora, and I threatened to tell you. He needed me discredited, distracted, dealing with my own problems instead of interfering with his. The pieces were starting to fit together now. Arielle's divorce had happened 2 years ago, right around the time Nora had started taking more business trips and working longer hours. I'd assumed the increased work was related to her getting promoted to senior account manager, but now I wondered if the timing was more deliberate. "So, this is revenge," I said. "This is justice," she corrected. "There's a difference." My phone buzzed with another text from Nora. I glanced at it without opening it. "She's going to want to talk," Arielle said. "She's going to have explanations for everything. She'll make it sound like the affair was recent, like the money was a legitimate business arrangement, like everything can be fixed if you just give her a chance." "And?" "Don't believe her. I have recordings." That stopped me cold. "What kind of recordings?" "Phone calls between her and Trent. Conversations about you, about your father, about how to handle the situation if you ever found out. She's not the woman you think she is, Holden. She's not the woman any of us thought she was." I sat back down on the bed, my mind racing through implications and possibilities. 15 years of marriage, and I was learning that I'd been living with a stranger. Someone who could lie to my face while planning elaborate deceptions behind my back. Someone who could take money for betraying my family's trust and then come home and ask about my day like nothing had happened. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "I want you to listen to the recordings," she said. "I want you to look at the evidence. And then I want you to decide what kind of man you want to be going forward." What's that supposed to mean? It means you have choices, Holden. You can pretend this conversation never happened, go home tomorrow, and try to rebuild your marriage based on the hope that she'll change. Or you can acknowledge what's really been happening and take control of your own life. I thought about Nora's laugh when Trent put his arm around her, the genuine warmth in her voice when she talked to him, the way she'd looked at me when I mentioned Arielle's texts, not with the confusion of an innocent person, but with the calculation of someone trying to figure out how much damage had been done. "Send me everything," I said. "Are you sure?" "Send me everything." There was a pause, then the sound of typing. "It's going to take a few minutes to upload everything to a secure folder. I'll send you the link when it's ready." "Arielle?" "Yes?" "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," she said. "Wait until you've seen what she really thinks of you." The line went quiet, and I was alone again with my thoughts and the growing realization that my life was about to change in ways I couldn't yet imagine. Outside, I could hear cars starting up as the reunion began to wind down. People heading home to their families, their normal lives, their comfortable assumptions about who they were married to and what their relationships meant. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Nora. The message was from Arielle. "Secure folder link attached. Password is Truth2024. Take your time with it. Call me when you're ready to talk about next steps." I stared at the link for a long moment, my finger hovering over it. Once I opened that folder, there would be no going back to the comfortable ignorance I'd been living in. No more pretending that my marriage was just going through a rough patch, or that Nora's behavior changes were related to work stress. But there was no real choice. I'd already crossed the line when I confronted them at the reunion. The only question now was whether I was going to move forward with complete information or continue stumbling around in the dark. I clicked the link. The folder contained dozens of files, organized by date and category, text message screenshots, email printouts, bank statements, hotel receipts, phone records, and several audio files with timestamps from the last 6 months. I started with the text messages. The earliest ones were from 3 years ago, shortly after Trent's divorce was finalized. Casual at first, thinking about you, and remember when we used to talk for hours, but quickly escalating to more explicit territory. Plans to meet, discussions about hotel rooms, detailed descriptions of what they wanted to do to each other. But it was the conversations about me that cut the deepest. "He's so boring," Nora had written. "Same routine every day. Work, dinner, television, sleep. I feel like I'm suffocating." "You deserve better," Trent had replied. "You always did. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we'd stayed together. If I'd been brave enough to overlook your mistakes." "No mistakes this time. I know what I want now." "What about Holden? What about him? He's so wrapped up in his little projects, he barely notices when you're gone. When's the last time he surprised you with anything? When's the last time he made you feel like a woman instead of a roommate?" I set the phone down and walked to the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face and looking at myself in the mirror. The man staring back at me looked older than 41, tired in ways that went beyond missing a few hours of sleep. Was I boring? Probably. Was I predictable? Definitely. But I'd thought those were good things in a marriage. Stability, reliability, consistency. I'd thought Nora valued those qualities, that they were part of what made our relationship work. Apparently, I'd been wrong about that too. I went back to the phone and continued reading. The audio files were worse than the text messages. I'd started with the most recent one, dated just 2 weeks ago. Nora's voice was clear and unmistakable, talking to Trent about their plans for the reunion. "He's definitely coming," she said. "I already bought his ticket. He hates these things, but he'll go because he thinks it's important to me." "Perfect," Trent replied. "That gives us the whole evening to catch up properly. We'll have to be careful. You know how people talk at these things. Let them talk. I'm tired of pretending we're just old friends." "Trent?" "What? You're not happy with him. You haven't been happy for years. Why keep pretending?" There was a pause, then Nora's voice, quieter now. "It's complicated." "It's only complicated because you're making it complicated. Leave him." "And then what? We try again after 20 years. We're not the same people we were in high school." "No, we're better. We know what we want now. We know what matters." "What about the business arrangement? If I leave Holden, I lose access to his family's projects." "There will be other projects, other opportunities. We don't need his father's money." $50,000 isn't exactly pocket change, Trent. There will be more where that came from. I'm expanding into commercial development, bigger projects, bigger profits, bigger opportunities for consulting fees. I paused the recording, my hands shaking slightly. The casual way they discussed the money, like it was a minor detail in their larger plans, made my stomach turn. This wasn't just an affair. It was a business partnership built on betraying my family's trust. I skipped ahead to an older recording, this one from 6 months ago. "He's getting suspicious," Nora was saying. "He asked about the Chicago trip yesterday, wanted to know why I didn't have any follow-up meetings scheduled with the contacts I supposedly made." "What did you tell him?" "That the leads were still developing, that these things take time. But he's not stupid, Trent. He's going to start asking more questions. So give him answers, make up some meetings, create some fake business cards. You're in PR, you know how to manage information." "I don't like lying to him." "You've been lying to him for 3 years. What's a few more lies?" "That's different. This is about work, about his family's business. If he finds out about the money..." "He won't find out unless you tell him. And why would you do that?" "Because I feel guilty, okay? He's a good man, Trent. He doesn't deserve this." "If he's such a good man, why are you here with me instead of home with him?" Another pause, longer this time. "Because you make me feel alive," she said finally. "Because when I'm with you, I remember who I used to be before I became someone's wife and someone's employee and someone's daughter-in-law. When I'm with you, I'm just Nora again." "Then stop feeling guilty about it. You deserve to be happy." "What about your sister? Arielle's been asking questions about why you've been traveling so much for work." "Arielle's not a problem. She's too busy with her own life to worry about mine. She's not stupid either. And she never liked me, even in high school. She was jealous. She had a crush on your boyfriend. What was his name? The quiet guy who worked on the school newspaper." My heart stopped. They were talking about me. "Holden," Nora said. "His name was Holden, and I know she liked him. I saw the way she looked at him at parties, at football games. She used to find excuses to talk to him. Well, she lost her chance. You got him instead." "Lucky me," Nora said, and I could hear the sarcasm in her voice. I turned off the recording and set the phone aside, my mind reeling. Arielle had liked me in high school? I'd never known, never even suspected. I thought back to those days, trying to remember interactions with her, conversations we might have had. There were fragments. She'd interviewed me for the school newspaper once, asked me about my plans after graduation. She'd been at parties where Nora and I were together, usually standing with a small group of friends, watching the social dynamics play out around her. Had she really been interested in me then? And if so, what did that mean about her motivations now? I picked up the phone and called her. "You listened to the recordings," she said without greeting. "Some of them. Enough. And? They mentioned you. Said you used to have a crush on me in high school. There was a long silence. Is that true? I asked. Does it matter? It matters for understanding why you're helping me now. Another pause, then. Yes, it's true. I liked you. I thought you were different from the other guys Nora dated. Smarter, kinder, more genuine. But you were completely devoted to her, and I was just the weird younger sister of her ex-boyfriend. So this is about getting back at her for that? No, Arielle said firmly. This is about getting back at both of them for what they did to my marriage, to your marriage, to your family's business. The fact that I had feelings for you 20 years ago is irrelevant. Is it? Holden, I'm not some lovesick teenager carrying a torch for 2 decades. I'm a 40-year-old woman who's been through a divorce, who's built her own life, who's learned the difference between fantasy and reality. I'm helping you because what they're doing is wrong, not because I think we're going to ride off into the sunset together. Her directness was both reassuring and unsettling. I wanted to believe her motivations were purely about justice, but the revelation about her past feelings added a layer of complexity I wasn't sure how to process. What else is in those files? I asked. Bank records showing the pattern of payments, hotel receipts from a dozen different trips over the past 2 years, email exchanges about coordinating their schedules, phone records showing hundreds of calls between them, usually when you were at work or traveling for your own projects. Anything recent? The most recent activity was yesterday. Text messages about tonight's reunion, about their plans afterward. What plans? Room 608 at the Grandview Hotel. Trent booked it this afternoon under his company name. They were planning to meet there after the reunion ended. I looked at my watch. It was nearly midnight. If their original plan had held, they would be there now, probably wondering where I was and what I knew. Are you going to confront her tonight? Arielle asked. I don't know. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. Can I make a suggestion? Go ahead. Don't make any decisions while you're angry. Don't do anything irreversible while you're processing this information. Take time to think about what you really want, not just what you want to do to them. It was good advice, but I wasn't sure I was capable of following it. The anger was building steadily, fed by each new revelation, each casual betrayal, each moment of realization that my entire marriage had been built on lies. There's something else, Arielle said. Something I haven't told you yet. What? The Chicago trip wasn't their first time together. It wasn't even their 10th time. They've been meeting regularly for 3 years, Holden. Hotels, weekend trips, even your house when you were traveling for work. My house? Twice that I can document. Once when you were in Denver for that conference last fall, and once when you were visiting your father in the hospital after his surgery. The hospital visit. I remembered that week clearly. My father had needed emergency surgery for a blocked artery, and I'd spent 4 days at the medical center, sleeping in waiting room chairs and eating vending machine food. Nora had stayed home, claiming she needed to handle some crisis at work, but promising to join me if the situation got worse. She'd been supportive during our phone calls, asking about his condition, sending flowers to his room, telling me how proud she was of how I was handling the stress. Meanwhile, she'd been entertaining her lover in our bedroom. How do you know about my house? I asked. Security cameras. Your neighbor across the street has a system that covers part of your driveway. Trent's truck was there both nights, arriving after dark and leaving before dawn. The level of planning and deception was staggering. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment affair or a case of 2 people getting carried away by old feelings. This was systematic, calculated, and utterly without regard for anyone else involved. I need to see her, I said. Tonight? Yes. Holden, I really think you should wait until— I'm not going to do anything stupid, I interrupted, but I need to look her in the eye and hear what she has to say for herself. All right, but call me afterward, okay? Whatever happens, don't handle this alone. I promised I would, then hung up and gathered my things. The hotel elevator was empty as it carried me down to the lobby, and the hallways were quiet, except for the distant sound of the bar crowd and the occasional door closing as late arrivals checked in. Room 608 was on the 6th floor, at the end of a long corridor lined with generic hotel artwork and the soft lighting designed to make everything look elegant and expensive. I stood outside the door for a moment, listening for voices or movement inside. Nothing. I knocked softly, then waited. After a few seconds, I heard footsteps, then the sound of the security chain being engaged. "Who is it?" Nora's voice, muffled by the door. "It's me." A longer pause, then the chain sliding back and the door opening just wide enough for her to see me. "Holden, what are you doing here? I think we need to talk." She was wearing the hotel bathrobe, her makeup removed, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. Behind her, I could see Trent sitting on the edge of the bed, fully dressed, but looking uncomfortable. "This isn't a good time," she said. "I think it's the perfect time," I replied, "unless you'd rather have this conversation tomorrow morning in front of a lawyer." Her face went pale, and she stepped back to let me into the room. The hotel room was exactly what I'd expected. King bed, sitting area, mini bar, the kind of generic luxury that cost $300 a night and left no lasting impression. Trent was standing now, his hands in his pockets, trying to look casual, but failing. Nora had moved to the window, putting distance between herself and both of us. "So," I said, closing the door behind me and leaning against it. "This is awkward." "Holden," Nora started, "I know how this looks, but it looks like my wife is in a hotel room with her ex-boyfriend at midnight after lying to me about her whereabouts," I said. "How exactly should it look?" Trent stepped forward. "Maybe you should calm down and let her explain." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something I'd missed in high school. Behind the confidence and the expensive clothes and the successful businessman persona, he was fundamentally weak. A man who needed to take what belonged to other people because he couldn't build anything meaningful of his own. "I'm perfectly calm," I said, "and I think she should definitely explain. I'm particularly interested in hearing about the consulting fees." Nora's face went white. "What consulting fees?" "The $50,000 you received for recommending Trent's company to my father. The money that's sitting in an account you opened specifically for that purpose. The account Trent has been using to funnel other under-the-table payments." She looked at Trent, and I could see the accusation in her eyes. He'd told her the financial arrangements were secure, untraceable, safe from discovery. "That was a legitimate business transaction," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Really? What business were you consulting on? What expertise do you have in construction management or project oversight? What deliverables did you provide that were worth $50,000? "I researched the contractors. I provided analysis and recommendations." "You provided access," I said. "You used your position as my wife to influence my father's decision, and you got paid for it. That's not consulting. That's fraud." "It's not fraud," Trent interjected. "Companies pay referral fees all the time. To licensed agents and registered consultants, not to family members with undisclosed conflicts of interest," I replied. "But let's set aside the legal issues for now. I'm more interested in the personal ones." I pulled out my phone and scrolled to one of the audio files. 3 years, I said. "That's how long this has been going on, according to your own recorded conversations. 3 years of lies, 3 years of secret meetings, 3 years of you coming home to me after spending afternoons with him." Nora's composure was cracking. "You recorded us?" "I didn't record anything. But apparently Trent's digital security isn't as good as he thinks it is." Both of them looked confused, and I realized they didn't know about Arielle's involvement yet. That was information I could use. "The Chicago conference," I continued. "The one where you made all those valuable contacts and learned so much about crisis management. Except you never attended any conference. You spent the weekend at the Palmer house with Trent, charging room service and spa treatments to the room while I thought you were building your career. Holden, please, she said, tears starting to form in her eyes. Let me explain. I'm listening. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. When Trent and I reconnected, it was just as friends, old classmates catching up. But then we started talking more, and I realized how unhappy I'd become. Unhappy with what? With everything. With my job, with our routine, with the way we'd stopped really talking to each other. When's the last time we had a real conversation, Holden? When's the last time you asked me about my dreams or my fears or what I wanted out of life? When's the last time you told me the truth about anything? She flinched as if I'd hit her. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed, and the sound was harsher than I'd intended. You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that I've been supporting you emotionally and financially while you've been planning a life with someone else? Is it fair that you took money for betraying my family's trust? Is it fair that you've been using our house, our bed, for your affair while I was taking care of my father in the hospital? How did you... She started, then stopped. How did I find out? Does it matter? The point is that I know. I know about the money, the trips, the lies, the recordings where you and Trent discuss how boring I am and how much you deserve better. Trent had been quiet during this exchange, but now he stepped forward again. Look, Holden, nobody wanted it to happen this way. But you have to understand, Nora hasn't been happy for years. She's been trying to make the marriage work, but sometimes people grow apart. People grow apart, I repeated. That's your explanation for systematic deception and financial fraud? The money wasn't fraud. The money was a bribe, I said. You paid my wife to influence a business decision that cost my father an additional $200,000 in overruns and delays. You delivered substandard work, cut corners on materials, and left him with foundation problems that are going to cost even more to fix. That stopped him. What foundation problems? The ones your company is going to be liable for when the engineering reports come back next week. The ones that are going to trigger a lawsuit and an investigation into your business practices. I was bluffing, but his reaction told me I was closer to the truth than I'd expected. His face went pale, and he looked at Nora with something approaching panic. You didn't tell me there were problems with the project, he said. I didn't know, she replied, but she was looking at me with new wariness. There's a lot you don't know, I said, about the investigation, about the evidence, about the people who've been watching your activities and documenting your arrangements. What people? Trent asked. People who have access to your financial records, your communications, your travel patterns. People who've been building a case against you for months. It wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely false either. Arielle had been documenting their activities, and the evidence she'd gathered could certainly be used to build a case if necessary. You're bluffing, Trent said, but his voice lacked confidence. Am I? How much do you know about digital forensics, Trent? About how long deleted files stay on servers, or how cloud backups work, or what kind of information can be recovered from phones and computers? Enough, Nora said suddenly. Enough with the threats and the games. What do you want, Holden? What do I want? I considered the question seriously. I want my wife back. The woman I married, the woman I thought I knew. But that person never existed, did she? She was just a character you played for 15 years while you figured out what you really wanted. That's not true. Isn't it? When did you decide our marriage was over, Nora? Was it 3 years ago when you started the affair? Was it when you took the first payment from Trent? Or was it earlier than that, and I was just too stupid to notice? She was crying now, but I felt no satisfaction in it. This wasn't the cathartic confrontation I'd imagined. It was just sad and sordid and exhausting. I never wanted to hurt you, she said. But you did hurt me. You've been hurting me for years, and the only reason I didn't know it was because I trusted you enough to believe your lies. So what happens now? Trent asked. I looked at him, then at Nora, then at the hotel room that represented everything that was wrong with my life. Now you both get to live with the consequences of your choices, I said. Nora, I'll be filing for divorce next week. I suggest you find a good lawyer because this isn't going to be amicable. Holden, please. Can't we talk about this? Can't we try counseling or... There's nothing left to talk about. You made your choice 3 years ago. Now I'm making mine. I turned to Trent. As for you, I'd recommend getting your financial records in order. When the investigation starts, you're going to want to be able to account for every payment you've made and every corner you've cut. What investigation? The one that starts when I file a complaint with the state licensing board about your business practices. The one that expands when the IRS gets interested in your unreported income and off-the-books payments. The one that really gets interesting when other clients start asking questions about their projects. I was making most of this up as I went along, but the fear in his eyes told me I was hitting close to home. You can't prove anything, he said. I can prove enough. Bank records, recorded conversations, documented meetings, witness statements. Maybe not enough for criminal charges, but definitely enough to destroy your reputation and your business. This is extortion. No, this is consequences. You've been operating like your actions don't matter, like you can take whatever you want without paying any price. Now you get to find out what the price actually is. I walked to the door, then turned back for one final look at them. Enjoy the rest of your evening, I said. It's going to be the last peaceful night either of you has for a long time. I left them there and walked back to my own room, my hands shaking with adrenaline and anger and something that might have been relief. It was over. The confrontation I'd been dreading and anticipating was finished, and now I could start figuring out what came next. My phone buzzed with a text from Arielle. How did it go? It's done, I typed back. Can we meet tomorrow? I think I'm going to need help with the next part. Of course, whatever you need. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked out at the city lights, thinking about the 15 years I'd spent building a life that turned out to be an illusion. Tomorrow, I would start building something real. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Nora's face when I mentioned the bank account, or heard Trent's voice on those recordings discussing my father's project, like it was just another opportunity to exploit. By 6 a.m, I gave up on sleep and went down to the hotel restaurant for coffee and whatever passed for breakfast. The dining room was nearly empty, a few business travelers checking their phones while eating, a family with young children trying to keep their voices down, an elderly couple reading newspapers and sharing comfortable silence. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that my world had collapsed 12 hours ago. My phone had been buzzing intermittently since dawn. Text messages from Nora, mostly variations on "please call me" and "we need to talk." I deleted them without reading the full messages. Whatever she wanted to say now, it was 3 years too late. At 8 o'clock, I called Arielle. "You're up early," she said. "I never went to sleep. Can we meet somewhere? I need to figure out what happens next." "There's a coffee shop on Maple Street near the library. Quiet, not many people we'd know." "Give me an hour." I checked out of the hotel and drove home to shower and change clothes. The house felt different somehow, like I was seeing it through new eyes. The photos on the mantle of Nora and me at various events over the years, the kitchen where we'd shared thousands of meals and conversations, the bedroom where she'd lied to me about conference calls while texting with Trent. I packed a suitcase with enough clothes for a week, along with important documents and anything else I might need. I wasn't sure where I'd be staying, but it wouldn't be here. Not yet. The coffee shop was exactly what Arielle had promised. Small, quiet, the kind of place where people came to work on laptops or read books rather than socialize. She was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with her back to the wall, a habit I remembered from high school. "You look terrible," she said as I sat down. "I feel terrible. But also relieved? I'm not sure how to describe it. Like you've been holding your breath for 3 years and finally exhaled? Something like that." A waitress came by to take my order. Coffee, black, and a bagel I probably wouldn't eat. When she left, Arielle leaned forward. "Tell me what happened last night." I gave her the full account of the hotel room confrontation, including my threats about investigations and legal consequences. She listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or raising an eyebrow at particularly dramatic moments. "You realize you were basically making up half of that stuff about investigations and IRS complaints," she said when I finished. "I know, but their reactions told me I was on the right track." Trent looked genuinely scared when I mentioned foundation problems and business practices. "He should be scared. I've been doing some research on his company since our divorce. There are a lot of unhappy clients, a lot of projects that went over budget or had quality issues. Your father's project isn't the only one." "What kind of issues?" "Substandard materials, corner cutting on safety requirements, workers without proper certifications, the kind of things that save money in the short term but create liability problems down the road." I thought about my father's development project, the one that was supposed to be his retirement legacy. 60 units of affordable housing for young families, built to high standards and designed to last for decades. If Trent had cut corners there. "Is there really going to be an investigation?" I asked. "There could be, if someone filed complaints with the right agencies, provided documentation, gave them reason to look closer at his business practices." "Someone like you?" "Someone like us," she corrected. "I have the financial evidence, but you have the family connection to the project. You'd be a more credible complainant." I considered that. Yesterday, the idea of filing formal complaints against Trent would have seemed vindictive, excessive. Today, it felt like simple justice. What about Nora? What about her? The money she took? Is that actually fraud, or was I just trying to scare them? Arielle pulled out her phone and showed me a screenshot of a legal statute. "Accepting payment for influencing a business decision without disclosure of the conflict of interest," she read. "In this case, using her position as your wife to access information about your father's project, and then recommending a contractor in exchange for compensation. Yes, it's fraud. It's also a violation of fiduciary duty and possibly conspiracy to commit fraud." Would prosecutors actually pursue it? For $50,000? Maybe, especially if it's part of a larger pattern of corruption or if there are other victims. I drank my coffee and tried to process the implications. 15 years of marriage, and it might end with my wife facing criminal charges. "I don't want to destroy her life," I said. "I just want to be free of this mess." "Those might not be mutually exclusive goals," Arielle said gently. "Sometimes people have to face consequences before they can change. And sometimes the consequences are just revenge dressed up as justice." She studied my face for a moment. "Are you having second thoughts?" "About the divorce? No. About trying to send them both to prison? Maybe." "What if I told you there were other women?" I set down my coffee cup. "What?" "Other women Trent has been involved with while he was with Nora. Other wives he's paid for information or influence. Other families he's hurt." "How do you know that?" "Because I've been talking to some of his other ex-girlfriends since our divorce, comparing notes, sharing information. Nora isn't special, Holden. She's just the most recent in a long line of married women he's used for business purposes." The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. It was one thing to lose my wife to someone who genuinely loved her. It was something else entirely to lose her to someone who was just using her as part of a pattern. "Tell me," I said. "Rebecca Martinez. Her husband owns a plumbing supply company. Trent had an affair with her 2 years ago. Got her to influence her husband's pricing for a commercial project. When the project was finished, he dropped her and moved on." "Did her husband find out?" "Eventually. They're divorced now. She lost her house, her kids spend most of their time with their father, and she's working 2 jobs to pay legal fees." "Anyone else?" "Jennifer Walsh. Her ex-husband was a city planning commissioner. Trent used her to get inside information about zoning decisions and permit approvals. When the commissioner found out, He resigned in disgrace rather than face an ethics investigation. How many others? That I can prove? 4, including Nora. That I suspect? At least twice that many. I felt sick, not just about Nora's betrayal, but about my own naivety. I'd thought this was about love, about two people who couldn't resist their feelings for each other. Instead, it was about business, about a predator who used romance to exploit married women for financial gain. Why didn't you tell me this yesterday? Because yesterday, you needed to focus on your own situation. You needed to confront them and decide what you wanted to do about your marriage. Today, you can think about the bigger picture. Which is that Trent Ardell is a predator who's been destroying families for years, and you might be in a position to stop him. I thought about Rebecca Martinez working 2 jobs to pay legal fees, about the city planning commissioner who resigned in disgrace, about other families that might be targeted in the future if Trent continued his pattern unchecked. What would it take? I asked. Coordinated complaints to multiple agencies. The State Licensing Board, the Attorney General's Office, the IRS, maybe the FBI if we can establish a pattern of fraud across state lines. We'd need the victims to come forward to provide testimony and documentation. Would they do that? Some of them. Rebecca's been waiting for an opportunity to get back at him. Jennifer's ex-husband might cooperate if it meant clearing his name. And there are others who might come forward once they see that someone's finally taking action. My phone buzzed with another text from Nora. This time I read it. Holden, please. I know you're angry, but we can work this out. Don't do anything you'll regret. I showed the message to Arielle. She's scared, Arielle said. Good. She should be. What if she's genuinely sorry? What if she wants to make things right? Then she can start by returning the money and cooperating with the investigation. But Holden, you need to understand something. The woman who took $50,000 to betray your family's trust, who lied to your face for 3 years, who used your house for her affair while you were caring for your sick father, that woman isn't going to suddenly become honest and trustworthy because she got caught. I knew she was right, but some part of me still wanted to believe that the woman I'd married was in there somewhere, buried under the lies and deception. I need time to think, I said. Of course, but don't take too long. Every day we wait is another day. Trent has to cover his tracks, to destroy evidence, to find his next victim. What about you? I asked. What do you get out of this? Justice for what he did to my marriage, and maybe something else. What? A chance to build something honest with someone who deserves it. She was looking at me directly, and I realized we were no longer talking about legal strategies or revenge plots. Arielle, I'm not asking for anything, Holden. I'm not expecting anything. But when this is all over, when you've had time to heal and figure out what you want your life to look like, I hope you'll remember that some people are worth trusting. I reached across the table and took her hand. I'll remember. We sat there for a moment, holding hands across a coffee shop table while my marriage ended and my future began to take shape. It wasn't romantic exactly, but it was real in a way that nothing had been for a very long time. So, I said finally, where do we start? She smiled, and I saw something in her face that I'd missed 20 years ago. Strength, intelligence, determination, and something else that might have been hope. We start by making some phone calls, she said. And then we make them pay. 3 months later, I stood in the parking lot of Ardell Construction, watching a team of federal agents carry boxes of evidence out of the building. The investigation had moved faster than anyone expected, once the victims started coming forward and the evidence started mounting. Rebecca Martinez had been the first to file a formal complaint, armed with bank records and recorded phone calls that Arielle had helped her organize. Jennifer Walsh's ex-husband had provided documentation of the zoning manipulation scheme. 2 other women had come forward with similar stories of being used for business information and then discarded. The state licensing board had suspended Trent's contractor's license pending a full investigation. The IRS had frozen his business accounts after discovering a pattern of unreported income and fraudulent tax filings. The Attorney General's office had opened a criminal investigation into what they were calling a systematic pattern of fraud and corruption. My father's housing project had been the final piece of evidence they needed. The engineering reports I'd commissioned had revealed extensive foundation problems, substandard materials, and safety violations that would cost nearly $500,000 to correct. When investigators compared the original specifications to what was actually built, they found evidence of deliberate corner-cutting and fraud. Nora had been arrested 2 weeks ago. The charges included conspiracy to commit fraud, accepting bribes, and violation of fiduciary duty. Her lawyer was pushing for a plea bargain, but the prosecutor seemed confident about getting a conviction at trial. I'd filed for divorce the day after our hotel room confrontation. The proceedings had been swift and brutal, with Arielle's evidence making it impossible for Nora to claim any marital assets or seek alimony. The $50,000 she'd received from Trent had been seized as proceeds of criminal activity. Our house was being sold to pay legal fees and restitution. "Satisfied?" Arielle asked, walking up beside me. "I'm not sure satisfied is the right word," I said, "but it feels like justice. Any word from her lately?" "Her lawyer called yesterday. She wants to meet, to apologize, to try to explain her side of things." "Are you going to?" "I don't think so. What's the point? Nothing she says is going to change what happened or undo the damage." We watched as the last of the evidence boxes were loaded into government vehicles. Trent's business was finished, his reputation destroyed, his future likely to include several years in federal prison. The investigation had revealed a pattern of fraud going back nearly a decade, affecting dozens of families and costing victims millions of dollars. "What about you?" I asked. "Any regrets about how this all played out?" "Only that it took so long," she said. "I should have acted years ago, when I first suspected what he was doing." "You weren't ready then. Neither was I." "And now?" I considered the question. The last 3 months had been the most difficult of my life, but also the most honest. I'd faced the truth about my marriage, about my own willingness to ignore warning signs, about the difference between being comfortable and being happy. "Now I'm ready to start over," I said. "With anyone in particular?" I looked at her, really looked at her, the way I should have 20 years ago. She was beautiful, but more than that, she was real. Honest, intelligent, brave enough to fight for what was right even when it was difficult. "I was thinking about asking this woman I know if she'd like to have dinner sometime," I said. "Somewhere nice, where we can talk about the future instead of the past." "I think she'd like that very much." "Good, because I've learned something important in the last few months." "What's that?" "Life's too short to waste on people who don't deserve your trust. But when you find someone who does deserve it, someone who's willing to fight for you and with you and beside you, you should hold on to them." "Is that a proposal, Mr. Solen?" "It's a beginning, Miss Seldor. The rest we'll figure out as we go." We walked back to our cars, leaving the wreckage of Ardell construction behind us. Tomorrow there would be more legal proceedings, more evidence to review, more victims to interview. But today, for the first time in years, I felt like I was moving towards something instead of running away from it. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment I thought it might be Nora again, but it was from my father. "Saw the news about Trent's arrest. Thank you for fighting for what was right. Proud of you, son." I showed the message to Arielle. "He should be proud," she said. "You could have just walked away, gotten your divorce, and moved on with your life. Instead, you chose to make sure this couldn't happen to anyone else." "We chose," I corrected. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." "Partners?" "Partners." We drove away from the construction company, toward whatever came next. In my rearview mirror, I could see the federal agents finishing their work, documenting the end of Trent Ardell's criminal enterprise. It had taken 3 months, but justice had finally caught up with him. And for the first time since that night at the reunion, I was looking forward instead of backward. The reunion had been about the past, about old relationships and ancient history. But this was about the future, about building something real with someone who deserved it, about learning from mistakes and choosing better, about getting it right this time. As I drove through the city streets, I thought about the conversation Arielle and I would have over dinner, about the plans we'd make and the life we'd build together. It wouldn't be perfect. Nothing ever was. But it would be honest. And after 15 years of lies, honesty felt like the greatest luxury of all. My phone rang, Arielle's name on the display. "Second thoughts about dinner?" I asked. "Just the opposite," she said. "I was thinking we should make it a celebration." "What are we celebrating?" "New beginnings, second chances, the fact that sometimes the good guys actually win." I like the sound of that. Good, because I have a feeling this is going to be the first of many celebrations. I smiled, really smiled, for the first time in months. She was right. This was just the beginning. And for the first time in years, the beginning felt full of possibility instead of dread. The reunion was over. The reckoning was complete. And the future, our future, was just getting started.